Hi, here we are. We're at the last lecture of the summer, and what we've gone through in this course, mental health and well-being in construction, is really trying to talk about building awareness of ourselves, of others, and what's really happening around us in high stress environments like construction. And let's face it, we face real mental and emotional burdens on the job site: long hours, financial insecurity, physical danger, job instability, language barriers, and unfortunately, sometimes trauma, real trauma. When we talk about mindfulness and mental health, we're not talking about being perfect or being peaceful. We're talking about being aware of what we're feeling, what others might be feeling, and how to create safer, more human-centered teams. A powerful tool to bring all of this together is called the Behavior Change Stairway Model. It's a mouthful, so sometimes you'll see it referenced as BCSM for Behavior Change Stairway Model. And what it does is it's supposed to teach us how to build trust, to drive behavior change, to influence behavior change, one conversation at a time, even when we're not mental health professionals. And trust, you're going to hear about trust a lot. And we've talked about trust a lot throughout this whole thing. And the reason why is trust is the foundation of psychological safety. And then psychological safety is the foundation of a healthy team. So they go together hand in hand. So, what is this magical model? Well, this model was originally developed by FBI crisis negotiators, people who are trained to de escalate the most intense human conflicts. But what's cool about it is that this same model can be applied to what we do every day in construction, where team leaders and safety personnel, co-workers might find themselves needing to calm someone down, diffuse a conflict, or support someone in distress. All you need is really a willingness to listen, reflect, and then move up the steps, one human moment at a time. You'll see this model used both for building culture and how we connect on a day to day basis, for navigating crisis, when a conversation might make the difference between safety and a harmful situation. This behavior change stairway was developed by Dr. Dwayne Fuselier of the FBI crisis negotiation team, and it's really based on how the brain responds to stress. So the model starts with active listening down there, active listening. And this isn't just about being polite. Listening sends a signal to the brain and the body that the environment, whether or not the environment is safe. And when someone feels heard, the brain starts to shift out of what's the fight or flight mode, our natural response to danger. And a small part of our brain, the amygdala, is in charge of scanning for threats. So when we're under stress, this part of the brain becomes very active, kind of like an internal alarm system. But when someone listens to us, like really listens to us, this part of our brain begins to calm down. And that's when levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, starts to drop. The cortisone is a chemical that the body releases to help us react really, really quickly when something feels dangerous. It keeps us on alert, and which is a good thing, but too much of it makes it hard for us to think clearly. The brain kind of goes into overdrive. So we can't really connect with each other when our cortisol levels are really high. We don't really feel safe because we're on alert. We're looking all around. When those cortisol levels drop, the body can relax. And this it becomes the place where people can start to think, start to look around, start to notice other things other than this fight or flight reaction that's going on. Once the body and the brain are kind of calm and they can feel safe, then the next step that you want to be able to show someone when they might be in a crisis mode or highly attuned mode is to then start to show empathy. And empathy, and we're going to talk about each of these in a little bit more detail, but empathy is the ability to understand and share someone's feelings. Showing empathy helps to lower emotional walls. So, and it's a two-way street. When you show empathy, you're lowering your emotional walls. But then when someone feels as if you are being empathetic towards them, that lowers their emotional walls as well, which then helps the brain to start to function again. When someone feels rather than thinks, but feels that they're understood, their animal brain is less likely to feel attacked or judged. And so simply naming what someone might be feeling, even in a gentle way, a calm way, can help allay that fear response, can help bring us down from that fight or flight fear response. And that activates then the brain, part of our brain that's responsible for social connection, can be activated. From there, the next step is rapport. So being able to build rapport. And rapport is that sense of emotional connection and mutual respect. It's not about manipulation, it's about alignment. When you feel like you have built rapport with someone, that's the moment you go from like being the boss or being the lowest one on the totem pole to someone that others can talk to or that you can talk to someone else. When rapport is strong, trust begins to take root and people begin to feel safer about being open. They're less defensive. Their brain is no longer completely stuck in that survival mode. It's just getting more and more open as you go along these steps. The brain in a trust mode becomes ready to learn. It becomes open to new ideas and it becomes open to cooperation. You're able to actually listen. Your brain is chemically now in a place that it can listen to what's going on and what other people are telling you. This is the turning point. This is that tipping point. And it's not because they were pushed into it, but because we supported the person to get to a level of trust. Then influence. So the next stage is when influence becomes possible. And that's not through power or authority, but through credibility and the relationship that is built with each other. This person is no longer reacting from fear, they're responding now from thought. And I said in an earlier lecture about how emotional intelligence is about training yourself how to respond rather than react. And so you'll start to see pieces come into this. And then finally, behavior change. So behavior change then becomes possible. And it's not because someone was forced or threatened. We're talking about voluntary change. So instead of fight or flight, they can now purposefully respond to a situation in a healthy way and change their normal reaction because they're responding. So this happens when people feel safe and respected and empowered to make healthier, more constructive choices. And if you just pause right here and think about yourself, so this is kind of framed in a way that you are the speaker in a conversation or a situation with someone else. But think about, do just a touch of introspection and think about when you felt like someone was truly listening to you, when you felt like they were truly showing empathy. How much closer could you be to that person? How much more could you joke around and build camaraderie? That's rapport. How much did you then trust that person the next time they brought some idea or suggestion that maybe you weren't familiar with or you didn't think about yourself first? And then how much influence did that person have over you to help you make decisions or and then if you needed to change, now you're able to change and adjust your direction because of that relationship that was built. So even though this is through a slant of crisis management, there's still many parallels that we can use in our day-to-day life. The key here is similar to Maslow with how the layers, the levels go up and up and up, and you can fall down and down and down. These steps are sequential, and so in any kind of a crisis situation, like if you are on a job site and you see that someone was just hurt or injured, or they look lost or confused, or they any kind of trauma, we could list a whole bunch of them at this point. These are the steps that you would want to go through as you are trying to bring that person down from an emotional level of crisis to a place where they can actually listen and then um, change their thinking or change their behavior. So these steps are important. Get back to where we were. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the neuroscience here because I find it so fascinating. But at a high level, to summarize, listening calms the nervous system. Empathy reduces, well, no, I can't see that, reduces the perception of threat. Building rapport develops an emotional connection. Developing trust breaks down defenses and opens the mind. Gaining influence then encourages openness and new perspective. And then you can get to behavior change, which is voluntary action. Dan Pink, right there, right? Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. You cannot motivate someone else. You can only build an environment in which others can become motivated. This is where those two ideas align with this behavior change stairway model and then autonomy, mastery, and purpose from Dan Pink. So let's get in this a little bit more. So I find neuroscience so fascinating. The way our brains and bodies work and what influences each other is just incredible. So I'm going to try to map out these steps really in a way that you can see it in how scientists have found that these actions align with how our brain chemistry actually works and where in our brain these things work. So active listening, this is way down at our brain stem that the where this processing is happening. It's down at the very bottom, um, allowing the prefrontal cortex, the front part of our brain, drive rational thought and then to re-engage. The showing empathy step, this is where I was telling you um, that we're actively sensing another person's emotional state, and then we start to engage in mirror neurons, which means that we're reducing the threat perception and then we're fostering connection. This happens in that, oh gosh, I can never pronounce it, amygdala part of our brain. Then building rapport, it also sits in that same basic part of our brain. This is where we're talking about where our brain aligns what we already know with what we're being shown. So this is where our brain is looking for familiarity to decide if it's something that we're comfortable with or we're not comfortable with. This is the part of brain that is so important to knowing if something is going to hurt us or if we like it or we don't like it or something to fear or not to fear because we're associating this new stimulus with what we already know, and that's what's going on in the rapport part. Then developing trust, though, lives in kind of a different part of our brain. It lives up a little bit more towards the frontal lobe. And this is where we start to have, where we do reasoning in our brain, where we take all of the information that we've collected, decide if it's safe or not safe. Are we familiar? Are we not familiar? And the frontal lobe is what kind of starts to we prioritize things and organize them. Then gain influence also lives in the frontal part of our lobe, and this in our frontal lobe. And this is where our brain is processing some of the nuances of that immediate communication. So, what is the tone of voice being used, the cadence, the pacing of how things are being displayed, and then we're going to process that and decide whether or not we want to stay comfortable or if it needs to this interaction needs to pop down to a different part of our brain. And then behavior change is interesting in that it goes also to the frontal part. So things are kind of being pushed from the lowest part of our brains in crisis up to to higher orders of thinking so that we can decide to make a change. So neuroscience I just love it. It's so interesting, and some of the things that we do is just insanely interesting to me. So this whole um, Fuselier model of the behavior change stairway was based on figuring out where each of these steps activates our brain so that you could go in an order so that negotiators, crisis negotiators, could address people at the most basic level of our thinking processes and attempt to slowly take us up through each of these steps till we can get to a place where we're voluntarily making decisions to do something different. All right. So let's get into some more detail on each of these steps. So the first step was active listening. And what is active listening? Well, it's really allowing a person to kind of vent their feelings without feeling interrupted or like disregarded. That the listener is paying attention to us, that we feel heard, uh, but you, as the listener in the conversation, have to really truly show with honest intent that you're not just kind of ho humming, that you don't just have your ears open, but that you're full in on listening to what this person is going through. And so there are four techniques that I'm going to cover here. And one of the first one is open ended questions, then paraphrasing, the use of silence with effective pausing, and then this technique called mirroring and effective listening. So open-ended questions. Basically, I'm sure many people have heard this phrase, open-ended questions, but the very simple definition of an open-ended question is that you cannot answer it with just a yes or a no. You can't just, the person that you're asking the question to cannot respond to the question with a one-word answer. So what are some examples of both of these? So let's just say somebody's looking down and you say, "You good?" That can be answered with a yes or a no versus what's been on your mind today. You can't answer yes or no to what's been on your mind today. Maybe a situation occurs where there's a near miss of an incident or an injury, and you ask somebody, "Did you see that?" Well, that's a valid question, yes or no, but that's an example of a close-ended question. If you were really trying to ask an open-ended question, then you would say, what went through your head when that happened? Or what did you see? Or what happened? um, if a team is falling behind, rather than saying, why are you behind? That invites defensiveness. You can ask, what's getting in the way right now? That's a better way, a non offensive way to ask a question. So that one is really not a closed-ended question, but it's a terrible question. Why are you behind? To turn that around and say, what's getting in the way right now? That's a much more productive question. Um, Here's another example. So if someone's been late repeatedly, if you say, "Are you going to be on time?" First of all, you're most likely being sarcastic and a little bit of a jerk, even though you do want to know if they're going to be on time next time, but that's a pretty aggressive question. You might change it around and say, well, what's making mornings so tough lately? That would be an exploratory, curious question versus, are you going to be on time? Which you could answer with, well, you would most likely answer with a yes, even if you know the answer is a no. But turning that around and asking a different question, like what makes mornings tough lately, you might uncover something very interesting. They might share something personal. They might share a line of hooey with you, but they also might share something personal and then open it up to you, kind of discovering more what's going on with that person. um, Here's a terrible question in almost any situation, whether it's a silly example that's here or not. But if you ask someone, and you see this with your kids, "Did you understand that?" That is a terrible question. That's a shutdown question. There are many other ways of asking, "Did you understand that?" without asking, "Did you understand that?" So, what part made the most sense of you to you? What should I explain again? The one of my favorite ones is, did I say that in a way that made sense? And then usually I follow on with, it made sense to me in my brain, but I'm not sure it made sense when it came out of my mouth. So help me explain this better. Asking someone, did you understand that? If they say no, it means to them that that either that you're putting the responsibility on the listener in that situation, and really it's most likely you as the communicator. Well, at least assume that it's first you as the communicator. All situations are different. Um, but in the end, open-ended questions are ones that are a combination of active listening, emotional awareness, and respect. If all you're looking for is a yes or no answer, then the conversation ends there. But if you practice using open-ended questions, they will almost always lead to another question and another question and another question, which can really help you get down to the root cause of what's going on. All right, so the next technique is paraphrasing. So what paraphrasing does is it shows them that you're with them in this discussion, in this exchange, not just sitting near them. And so how do you paraphrase? Well, you're not just parroting, it's not parroting, it's paraphrasing. So a parrot just echoes back what they've heard. When you're paraphrasing, you're repeating back what someone has said to you in your own words. You're making sure that you understand what the person actually meant by what they said. And, one of the things that I have come to learn is that words words are dangerous things. They're so important. They each have meaning, but because we all come from different places, I might call and different experiences, I might say purple, and to me, I mean a light violet purpley color. And then to someone else, it might mean a super dark, like royal blue almost color purple. We're both saying the same word, but we mean vastly different things. And so paraphrasing in your own words helps to make sure that your vocabulary is aligned with the person that you're communicating with. When you paraphrase, you're usually waiting until the person has finished speaking, at least an appropriate pause in the conversation. And so that encourages you to confirm your understanding without interrupting them. It gives the speaker, the person you're talking to, a chance to clarify your understanding or correct it. Sometimes in that clarification process, you find more little things under the hood to clear up. So paraphrasing is a really important element of active listening. It tells the person that you're there with them. It tells them that you're tracking what they're saying. That that paraphrasing and clarifying, like speaking back, make sure that you can then say, okay, good, we both understand now, what's the next part? And then you ask that question, and then they talk, and then you paraphrase again. It helps focus on the core feeling that the person is going through, or their main point, without getting locked up on every single word. And this is something that personality styles really is important to pay attention to here, because there are some personality styles, my green thinkers and gold planners, love to be very nitpicky and specific on the words. They will spend more time correcting the word that someone chose than listening to what the person was actually trying to say. And you know who you are out there. You know if you have a spouse who's either green or gold, because they'll constantly correct you on the exact words. And then paraphrasing helps people feel seen and validated, even if you can't fix the problem. So again, Maslow here, right? With the safety needs being seen and validated, and the social needs. So paraphrasing, humongous tool, very important. So here are some examples that you could use to open your paraphrasing. You could say something like, so what I'm hearing you say is, or you might be, I think you're saying this, help me understand better, or let me make sure I've got this right. You're frustrated because la la, or it was unfair because la la. Um, you can ask questions and affirm what someone is saying without agreeing to what they say. And that is an interesting skill too. Practice would be very mindful and try to practice over the next couple of weeks. When you're talking to someone, how can you affirm what someone said without agreeing with what they said? And that will help you keep in this paraphrasing place. Just because you say I heard you and I understand does not mean that you're agreeing with what they're saying. So be careful, blues out there, the connectors out there, that as you're paraphrasing, you're not necessarily agreeing with what's being said. You're in danger of doing that because you might not want to agree with what someone says. You're just trying to affirm that you've heard what they say and that you understand so that you can get to the next level, the next layer. All right, effective pausing, another technique of active listening. So I like this idea here that sometimes the most honest part of a conversation happens after a pause. That's when someone realizes it's safe to say what they really mean. Now, if you're talking to a thinker, pauses become incredibly important. If you're speaking with an introvert, pauses are really, really important. They need time to think. They're going to process everything mentally and they're not going to say it out loud. Whereas if you're working with an extrovert or maybe a mover or an orange, or an extroverted orange, you're most likely going to hear them doing all of their thinking out loud. But if you don't pause and wait for the person to have a chance to think through, they're going to end up doing just simple head nodding and they're going to then feel like you're that you're not really listening to them. So silence can feel uncomfortable, but it's a very powerful tool. People will, if you just pause and take a deep breath, because the silence is uncomfortable for a lot of people, they'll fill the silence with either another line of um, storytelling, or they'll tell themselves out of story and start getting to the truth. So sometimes you want to very purposefully just pause, watch your facial expressions so that you're not smirking at them. Um, accidentally and just wait and pause. Pausing, effective pausing means intentionally holding space before responding. Get comfortable with silence. One of the greatest books on facilitation I ever read was Don't Just Do Something, Stand There. And it was really all talking about how to use silence. Uh, this can happen after someone speaks or before you reply or during emotionally charged moments, just taking a breath. It shows that you're not rushing to respond, that you haven't made a judgment before, that you're not moving in with a fix, like a generic fix. Pauses are so important. If you can pause, it signals that you are calm, that you're in control, and that you respect the person that you're talking to. In a negotiation, um, I had an attorney who was a professional arbiter, a mediator, and she always used to say that the calmest person in the room wins. The calmest person in the room always wins in a negotiation. So that is using silence, and that is not being uncomfortable with silence, and that is letting silence and the brain to work and think and process using that to your advantage. You could see this as a few seconds of silence after someone finishes talking. Maybe try, if you have trouble with this, try to train yourself to take a deep breath before you give an immediate reply. Maybe try learning to count to three. This can get really tough when I found myself, I never interrupted people before I moved to Manhattan. And then I found myself interrupting people quite a lot. The other thing that I've noticed, at least for myself and possibly for others, I'm not in their brain, so I can't tell exactly, but these Zoom calls make it really hard. I mean, yes, you can raise your hand and all that other stuff, but I've never been in a culture that people use that. So on the phone, and it's worse on a phone because you can't raise your hand. But sometimes I find myself feeling it necessary to immediately jump in and talk over people, or I won't get to say what I need to say. And I've been in board meetings where we're talking about staffing, and people saying, well, the person never speaks up. I never hear from them. Like it's a bad thing. So it's like, okay, you gotta, get in what your contributions to the team. But sometimes it's really hard. And don't if you don't, especially as a leader, practice giving white space, silent space, then you just find people rushing in. And it seems like we're conditioned to do that even more now. Even pausing and saying, give me a minute to think about that. I want to process what you said is totally okay, especially to show that you're really respecting the person that you're listening to. All right. So that was open-ended questions, paraphrasing, and effective pausing. So now we've got this technique, mirroring and effective listening. So this is really about letting the person that you're talking to, or letting the person who's sharing what's going on, hear themselves, hear what they're saying. So you kind of got there with some paraphrasing, but when someone's really working through something, sometimes the best response isn't always giving advice, it's reflection. So meaning that you're gently repeating a word or phrase that they just said, and that's very similar to paraphrasing, but it's not exactly the same thing. It's like when you maybe pick out one or two words that were just said and you repeat it back. So if someone says, that wasn't fair, then you could say, okay, fair, fair. That wasn't fair. That's an example of mirroring, which is different than paraphrasing. Um, Reflective listening means naming what you think they might be feeling based on what they're showing you in their tone or their body language, and kind of less about the words. So both tools help build trust because it's showing that you're really engaged with them. And but more importantly, it's even if you said nothing and you just looked and your body was calm and relaxed and you were just looking at them, just very calm and relaxed, that can be enough to show that you're listening, that you're actively listening. A few head nods here and there, not bobbing around like an idiot. I'm actively listening. I'm actively listening. I'm actively listening. That's not what this means. Just being present, fully present in that conversation, that exchange, can help make the other person that you're talking to feel seen, feel heard, and feel valued, which is the first step. So it could be, are you exhausted? I know you've been juggling a lot lately. It sounds like you might not be sure where to start. Can Where do you think you might want to start next? Or that sounds frustrating, or like you've been carrying it for a while. So you're affirming that you've heard. You're not necessarily agreeing, but you're affirming that you've heard. And that's really the purpose of active listening. All right, so active listening was down at the brainstem. The next step is showing empathy. So remember, when you show empathy, it helps reduce the perception of threat and it signals safety. So this down regulates the amygdala, geez, and reduces the perception of threat while allowing a more kind of grounded emotional response. It slows down that fight or flight chemical reaction. Empathy is the ability to understand another person's feelings or motivation. It like, I get it. I get it. It means really asking that cliche, how would I feel in their shoes? How would I feel? How would that make me feel? And can I imagine how that would make me feel to the point that I in that moment can be sharing those emotions. That's empathy. It's a shift in perspective from emotional awareness to action. You become, when you're being truly empathetic, you can become similarly emotional as the person is that you're talking to. And it's connection at that point. It's not just that you're noticing or that you hear it, it's that you're connecting. Like, if my daughter comes home from school crying because something went wrong and I find myself crying too, that's a sign of empathy. Um, there is a difference between sympathy and empathy. They're both useful, they're both valuable, but they're different. Sympathy is like you acknowledge that someone is in distress. Like my daughter could come home from school and say she had a really terrible day and be like, "Oh, yes, sometimes days are bad and I get it that, that happens and I'm sorry you're upset." Versus what happened, and getting as emotionally invested in her experience as I would more closely would be if it was my own experience. That's kind of the difference. So you sympathy you can acknowledge, but empathy you really understand the feelings. And many times you'll hear people say that you can't be empathetic unless you've experienced it on your own, like having a parent die. I don't think anyone really understands what it's like when a parent dies until they've had a parent die, or holding your child in your arms for the first time. I remember when I held my daughter for the first time after having her, my very first thought after, oh, she wasn't ugly, and thank goodness for that, but that's terrible, right? But my first thought was, oh, I get it. This is what my mom was talking about. This is now a club I belong to that I didn't even know existed. It was a completely different level of awareness. And I thought about my mom and dad a lot, holding and looking at my kids as I held them. So that's more of an example of what people mean when they say that you can't be empathetic until you've had that same experience. But I must say that I disagree with that. I think, well, in some cases, what the two examples I gave before, I think, yeah, you just don't get it until you've experienced it. But we can be truly empathetic to others. And the higher and higher our emotional awareness and our emotional intelligence is, the better our ability to truly be empathetic. It's not about pity, it's not about platitudes. It means really um, being there, being in it with someone else. And to be empathetic, you cannot be multitasking and be empathetic. You got to slow down. You got to connect. You got to listen. So you have to be present. And you have to lower your emotional walls a significant degree to allow yourself to become empathetic. And some people do it really, really well. And then other people are never very empathetic. And in fact, one of our mental disorders, being a sociopath, they that's one of the symptoms of being a sociopath is that you cannot be empathetic to other people. Okay, next step in the stairway is building rapport. So what have we done? We've done active listening, we have shown empathy, and now we're building rapport. So rapport involves that emotional memory. Well, it makes sense that rapport comes after building empathy because you have shared an emotional connection when you're showing empathy to someone. Rapport involves that memory and recognition. It's still tied to that word I can't pronounce, the amygdala and the hippocampus in that temporal lobe, which is kind of back there a little bit more. These areas of your brain process social cues and emotions, and it remembers what were the situations of safe interactions. So this is the location in our brains that we can actually build rapport. And so the points here are like, if you don't have rapport with others, you no people aren't open. There's this before rapport, that's where hearing happens. During and after rapport, that's where listening happens. Without rapport, people can just shut down. And why? We've said lower emotional walls. Well, if you don't have the rapport, then where are your emotional walls? They're up. I often say when I'm facilitating meetings, I'd like to go through rules of conduct, and usually one of the rules of conduct is keep an open mind. And what I say is that you know that your mind is closing when you start to feel defensive, because when your brain is being defensive, like, are they judging me? Are they hurting me? Are they going to tell me I'm doing a crummy job? Is somebody smarter than me? This idea is stupid. I've already done this 50 times. I know better. Those are all like defensive thoughts. And when your brain is doing that, you're not open to new ideas at all. So that's a trigger. That's a warning that your mind is not open to new ideas when you're thinking defensively. There's a great book from Marshall Goldsmith, Goldstein, called Triggers, and it's all about learning how to pick up on how your brain self-talk keeps your habits in a non-healthy healthy state. It's a really cool book. With that report, people feel judged or rushed, like, okay, got it, fine, I'll move on and do it. Or you don't care about this, I'm just gonna skip over and go over here. Um, and then without rapport, people will avoid talking to you later. This is when, and you can see it all the time in real life. You can always tell those coworkers who have rapport together and then those who don't. You might not like or dislike somebody. You might be completely neutral to somebody, but you might not have a rapport with them. And you can tell the difference. You could probably list out in 2 seconds the people that you have a rapport with and the people that you don't. When there is rapport between people, they'll open up, they'll listen, they'll most importantly share concerns or stress. So here's a sign on a construction site. If you go to a daily huddle and the only person talking is a foreman or a superintendent who's leading that daily huddle, I guarantee you that there is little to no rapport amongst those teams, the crew or the team that's doing the work. Because if they had rapport with them and they were truly being a leader in those moments, people would be sharing concerns. They would be sharing stress. They would be sharing worries. They would be sharing ideas. That is a sign of rapport is the chatter. Do you have any questions? Do you have any concerns? What questions? Oh, those were closed-ended questions, weren't they? Do you have any questions? Yes or no? Do you have any concerns? Yes or no? Those are closed. What concerns are out there? What might we do better? Poke holes in this idea. Those are all different ways of being open-ended. And when you get a response to those kinds of questions, then that's a sign that you've got rapport on your team. And people are willing to ask for help when there's rapport. So how do you build rapport? Remember, a lot of this was written in the context of a first responder to a crisis situation. So these might be techniques that are useful to us, and they are because you never know who you're going to meet or what's going to be happening. So if you can possibly use someone's name and make eye contact with them, that is a very early step to building rapport. Matching their energy. So if someone is calm, then you be really calm. If someone is direct, then you be direct. You're going to start to see how all the personality style information that we went over at the beginning can help you here, because we were talking about how different personality styles are under stress and then what you can do for each one. So if you're talking to a green, what do you do? Give them data, give them a puzzle to solve. If you're talking to a blue, talk about a personal situation, a relationship, how they think others might feel. Those are all techniques. If you're talking to a gold, ask them, well, what might be a good plan to get out of this? How might this be reorganized so that it's more effective? Those are all techniques that you can use. And because you understand personality lingo, you can be much more specific to the things that you can do to build rapport. Show interest, ask follow-up questions. Those, the ask why 5 times. If you've done any kind of lean or Six Sigma or continuous improvement, procedural continuous improvement, there's the Ishikawa diagram and the 5 whys. No, that's not that is Ishikawa. The 5 whys, the fishbone diagram. You always got to ask for every bone in the chart, every node in the chart, why at least 5 times. And that's how you can start to really get under the hood and figure out what's going on. All right. So once you've built rapport, then you can start to develop trust. And this is where minds are really they're they may have started opening with rapport, but with trust, when you're in a trust relationship, it stays open and will continue to get wider. If you're just at a level of rapport and not any further, that rapport is kind of what do you say, kind of transactional. It can kind of come and go. It could be great in the moment and then kind of fizzle out a little bit later. But if you've gotten to the place where you have truly built trust, then that openness stays open because you're in a trust spot. Uh, when you're in a trust spot, you people tend to their brains will pause a little bit before it pops right down. A threat pops right down to the brainstem and goes fight or flight because you're pausing and processing through a filter of trust. When someone feels emotionally and physically safe enough to lower their defenses, that is a sign of a trust environment. Um, if you have ever read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and he actually repeats this again in the 8th habit, talking about the trust account and how you every interaction either makes a deposit into the trust account or a withdrawal. And so developing trust, it's like when you start active listening, that's a deposit. When you start showing empathy, that's a deposit. When you start building rapport, deposit, right? Then when you get enough deposits, you kind of have this balance that a working trust account. But you can erode trust, and you erode trust by missing promises, missing commitments, little white lies. Oh, being nasty to somebody who's not there, who can't defend themselves. All these little things can be, as Covey says, withdrawals from the trust account. And so with this model, this behavioral change staircase model that's used in crisis negotiations, these are all really great descriptors of how you can make more and more and more deposits into the trust account. So in crisis, here are some practical steps from the models and the crisis negotiators to keep in mind, to keep building that trust incrementally in a crisis situation, especially with someone new, someone that you don't know. So be calm. Again, calmest person in the room wins. This is shown through your tone and your pace. That tells the person whether you need them to stay alert or they can let their guard down. Be clear, say what you're doing. So if you were to walk up on someone that you think is in a true crisis, like an immediate harm style crisis, you need to stay calm first and foremost. And then you need to tell them each and everything that you're doing. I'm going to step a little closer to you now. Is it okay if I sit next to you? Can I hold your hand? It's okay. You don't have to explain anything right now. We're just going to sit here. You very clearly and consistently tell the person what is going to happen, and then you do that thing slowly and methodically. Being consistent, say only what you mean, and don't promise to do things that you can't control. Be present. So listen, that active listening without trying to fix. And that tells the person that they matter right now. In the here and now, they are the most important thing to you. By you being calm, clear, consistent, and very, very present. Do not flip out your telephone while you're doing this. And if you can possibly use their name, that's one of the fastest ways to show personal respect. So you could walk up to someone calmly and say, I'm Laura, and I'm going to sit here next to you, if that's okay with you. And what's your name? What would you like me to call you? Those kinds of things. And then finally, you can start to gain some influence. So gaining influence is where they trust you. And so now they're willing to be open to a new perspective or a new idea. This is all executive functioning in our brain now at this point. This is now moved up to like full blown reasoning parts of our brain. This is sifting through our various perspectives, not just of what we've experienced or what we know, what we've learned, what's possible. This is the creative part of our brain. It goes in and kind of does these what if scenarios also. And so this is where you can start to help someone imagine what might be a different outcome based on the kinds of things that they behaviors they might change. So this is where planning happens in our brain. This is where evaluation happens in our brain. This is when you're at this gain influence stage and you're able to get to where people are open to new perspectives of what's going on and what the immediate and long-term future could be, that's when you're starting to make an impact. It happens only after active listening, showing empathy, building rapport, and developing trust are established. You don't just right away go in and can influence someone to change their mind on everything, no matter what Hollywood wants you to know. Um, it's not about control. This is about guiding someone while their mind is open. So I had talked about having the mind open in the trust zone and that it will stay open. And that's the stage that you can kind of be gaining influence. It's like the buckets under the tap, catching the water at that point. Um, this is no longer in defense. This is really, really in curiosity. And there's a great book called Curiosity by an author called Ian Leslie. And the power of being curious and the way your intelligence grows when you're in a state of curiosity is really compelling. When you're at this place where you can gain influence, it means really helping someone figure out, based on these different perspectives and different ideas, what they might voluntarily choose to do next. So, voluntarily choose. Oh, there was an example of mirroring right there. I just repeated one or two words from something that I said, so I mirrored myself. It's gaining influence is it's just the next step. It's where people are considering their choices for the next thing that they're going to do. So what does gaining influence kind of sound like when you've got maybe someone that you have gained influence with? So you might hear things from them like, maybe I don't have to handle this alone. Maybe I do need to take a break or talk to someone. Maybe there is another way of looking at this. Those kinds of things are indicators that you're at this influence stage in this interaction or in this relationship. Um, you can only gain influence when you've listened without judgment, when you've shown that you were calm even when they weren't calm, and you've followed through and you've built credibility. And then phrases that you could try to be in that influence mode is, would it be okay if I shared something I've seen others do? Can I offer an idea and you tell me what you think? What would help you feel safer right now? Would it make sense to take 5 minutes before we talk more? Take note of these kinds of questions. You're actually asking the permission from the person that you're talking to, um, if you can then say more. So you've already listened, you've already paraphrased, you've already mirrored, you've already reflected, you've already been there with your tone, your cadence, everything. You've been there with that, and now you're operating in a place of trust and asking them for their permission to give them feedback that is not directly reflecting what you heard them say. So then keep in mind that in moments of emotional overload or trauma, the part of the brain that evaluates risk shuts down, and it's just not happening. You're not thinking in that way. So people need to be calm and controlled to be influenced. And this happened even in a meeting that we have in construction once a week, every other week. When people are starting to get all kerfluxed and crazy, it's time to change the topic, time to take a break, time to make a lighthearted comment or a nice lighthearted comment that's appropriate, whatever it is. But you're not going to gain any influence when people are arguing like that. You might get some false head nods and some false agreement. False consensus is another great buzzword or phrase. False consensus, it can be the killer of teams. It is the killer of alignment. And so uh, when people are at an agitated state, you're not going to influence them at all. You got to figure out different ways of really getting there so that you can get true consensus and true um, agreement, or you're just going to keep on having the same discussion over and over again. So to do this, you offer options. Ask for permission to share. Speak calmly and clearly, and stay a human in this. And don't make them feel like you're talking down to them at this stage. Try to avoid you get to, if you don't avoid these things, you get to take yourself back down the staircase a little bit. So giving ultimatums, drop you right back down the staircase. Talking over them, so interrupting them while they're evaluating options, back down. You need to, or you should, avoid this and raise your voice and interrupt or take credit and assist blame. Now, as an aside, this is great marital advice too. Just saying. All right. So then we finally get to the upper tier in the staircase, and that's changing behavior. So voluntary behavior change requires the integration of cognitive control, so what we're actually thinking, motivation, the desire to change. So, oh, damping, you should be thinking autonomy, mastery, and purpose at this time. And motor planning. So what you're going to actually do about it, what actions you will take. So this is all happening in our frontal lobe and in the motor cortex and decision-making regions of our brain. This is where accountability happens. So more on behavior change here. Behavior change is the result of feeling safe and seen and supported. You don't force someone to change. Just like I said before, you can't motivate anyone. You can only build environments in which they can be motivated. It happens because you've gone through all of the steps with someone. It behavior change becomes possible when a person feels emotionally regulated, when they no longer feel threatened, when they believe you're on their side, and when they feel like they have regained a sense of control. So I just want to pause here and make sure that the context is makes sense for what we're talking about. We started this class talking about mental health and well-being. And if you read those four things with just those words in your mind, mental health and well-being, for people when they feel emotionally regulated, when they don't feel threatened, when they believe the team, their others, their family, their peers are on their side, and when they feel like they have a sense of control. Doesn't that also apply to great leadership? When a leader is feels emotionally regulated and they can help others feel emotionally regulated. When the leader doesn't feel threatened and they have an environment in which their team members are not feeling threatened, when the team, along with the leader and the whole team, all the team members believe that they're on each other's side, I've got your back. And then when the team and the leaders feel like they have a sense of control, you could uh, make these align exactly with Maslow. You can make these align exactly with Pink. You could go through Mary Missikin's book, Personality Lingo, again, and just with these four things, you could pick out all those little sections in the book for each color. And what you can do, those are all, you could align all of these with that. These four little pieces are the things that either show you that people are, that there's a sense of well-being there, that that things are in balance. And if they're not, then how can you either be there for as a support for people to listen to so that they can feel these four things? How can you build an environment and be a real leader, a real team member, a real value add contributor to this, to a culture where people feel like this? These are these four pieces are kind of the spot that you really want to facilitate people being in. And everything that we've talked about in this whole class is either how you get there, how you recognize it, or how you correct it. Only when someone feels these four things can they choose to stay on a balanced, healthier, safer path, like stepping away or asking for help or calming down. So here's some simple examples of behavior change. So it could be that somebody was feeling emotional overload. And remember, an emotional overload could be somebody crying, somebody screaming, somebody pouting and stomping off. It could be giving the silent treatment. Those are all examples of, like we like to say in our culture, oh, they're getting all emotional. That usually means somebody's crying. There's more to it than that. If you can't control your yelling, I'm telling you, you're in emotional overload too. So once I came present to that, I just started in my mind to feel sorry for people yelling. And it completely changed my perception, my way of thinking when people would yell and like, oh my goodness, you're as out of control as somebody crying over there in the corner, and now I feel sorry for you that you can't keep it together. So anyway, so an unhealthy response would be all of those things that I talked about. And then the behavior change would be to take a breath, talk it out, and calm back down. Or maybe a situation happened and somebody witnessed an injury on a site. Well, an unhealthy response might be just shutting down and walking away, just shutting down and walking away, versus a healthy response might be accepting support or talking about it, staying engaged with it. Another situation might be becoming tense on a job site and then it escalates to yelling. Well, a healthy behavior change might be to just pause and agree to revisit the topic calmly, or begin asking why 5 times or what 5 times so that you can get down to the root cause. So those are all just some examples. And so that is the end of our time together for this semester. I hope you enjoy the summer, what's left of it. And I know I had said in the syllabus that there was going to be a final, but I'm not going to give you a final. This last homework assignment was pretty crazy, and um, and I think that y'all deserve a bit of mind relaxation, staying calm, some meditation before either the semester kicks off or the next round of fall craziness in job sites starts. So enjoy your families and enjoy the summer, and thank you so much. I really enjoyed putting all of this together for you guys, and I really hope that you got a lot out of it because I sure enjoyed doing it for you. So thank you all and have a great rest of the summer.